Okay, welcome everyone. So once again, I want to thank everyone who's taken from their time and joined us this evening. This evening is the third in the series of sessions we're doing on the introduction really to Masorti Judaism. This is the last one of the first section, which is welcome, introducing Masorti Judaism. We did one on the philosophy, we did one on the institutions, and today we're going to talk about the communities. There'll be an additional section that will also talk about the Masorti movement in Israel, and we'll also talk about different aspects, but that will be later in the year.
Las comunidades Masorti en Israël et d'autres sujets.
Inform people that we're also planning a study day on the 21st of June. And the study day on the 21st of June, first of all, I'll put the flyer on the screen. And that's the flyer on the screen. It's a study day on the subject of Jewish prayer in a time of coronavirus. And it particularly wants to address the issues that communities are facing with preparing for the high holidays. We have a session on conducting online services. We have a session on streaming services on Shabbat and Yom Tov, the case for and against. We have a session on online choirs, and adding to it a virtual tour of Jewish Warsaw, because in theory, the meeting is taking place in Warsaw, even though it's taking place online. But if we weren't online, we would be in Warsaw on that weekend for our regional meeting. So that's put in your diaries the 21st of June, and I'm really looking forward to that, because all of those topics are very important topics for our communities, and they're all the things that I'm constantly involved with. And when I speak with the rabbis, and when I speak with the leaders of our communities, the things that they're really worried about now. And now is the time really to be preparing for the high holidays in September. In any case, we want to start the program this evening. The program this evening is about Masorti communities around the world. There are hundreds and hundreds of Masorti communities around the world. We are used to thinking of ourselves as a small movement, and we're used to thinking of our communities as being very small, but that's not the case everywhere else in the world. And I'm in a rare position that I travel all the time, and I get to see the full range of our communities. And what I wanted to do this evening is to introduce you to some of our communities, either because they're very prominent and important, or because they're very unique and perhaps exotic, and to give you a taste and a flavor of what the Masorti movement looks like around the world. Our first speaker this evening is Margo Gold. She's speaking to us from Atlanta in the United States of America. She's past president of the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism in the United States. And I'm not going to introduce her anymore. She's going to speak for herself. And please, Margo, tell us a little bit about what the Masorti movement looks like, what the conservative movement looks like in the United States of America.
Thank you so much, Chaim. And thank you all for inviting USCJ, as we call it, into the session this evening. United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism is an umbrella organization of almost 600 conservative congregations in the United States, in Canada, Mexico, and Cuba. We also have a congregation in Hawaii, which I think gives us cachet. We are mostly egalitarian congregations. Some of the congregations in Canada continue to be a little more traditional. The members of our congregations pay usually family dues to those congregations, and the congregations in turn pay dues to be part of United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. Our mission is to help envision and pursue what an authentic and dynamic Judaism looks like that can inspire today's and the next generation of Jews. We tend not to use the word conservative because it's often misunderstood. You'll notice we don't use Masorti. I think that is because back in 1913 and the late 1800s, that was not, they were seeking to be assimilated. So an English word was chosen to conserve the traditions of Judaism. Our mission at United Synagogue is to strengthen Kehilot, Jewish communities both inside and outside the walls of the synagogue. We all know that the current generation is not necessarily much of a joiner. The idea of a membership in the congregation is probably from a different generation. And so that is part of our goal, is how to reach Jews both inside and outside the walls, and help them embrace and connect both between themselves and other Jews, between themselves and the community, and of course, their own connection to God. So at United Synagogue, we focus on synagogue leadership, helping them to develop their skills so that in turn, they can help their congregations on a road to thrive. One of the ways in which we do that is through collaboration and partnership. We understand that bringing members of a congregation together, just as all of you are here together tonight, there is so much to be learned from one another. And so that is the model that we use. You may also have heard that the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism and the Rabbinical Assembly we have now hired a single CEO, Rabbi Jacob Blumenthal, who will be the chief executive officer for both organizations. And we hope over the next few years to find new ways to bring the two organizations even closer together. We use many tools to accomplish bringing people together. One of them is convening. USCJ holds a convention every 2 years. This last year, it was held in Boston, and we did it in conjunction with the Rabbinical Assembly, and we had about 1,500 people participate. And the programming was both for congregations and their rabbis, because we feel that the rabbis are an essential to the whole development of leadership within a congregation. So we convene at conventions. We convene our congregations in terms of their size. We bring together large congregations, medium-sized and small congregations. We provide leadership training. We call it Sulam, ladder. We provide Sulam for presidents, for officers, for strategic planning, for current leaders, for emerging leaders. And we even had a program called Purposeful Living, designed to help engage empty nesters who had been in the congregation for years and were feeling that they weren't getting as much focus. It was all on bringing in new people. So we work with a variety of audiences. And a lot of the work that we've done at United Synagogue is helping create spaces, workshops, opportunities to bring our leaders together from congregations across the network to work together. So I'd like to share a couple of trends and examples of work that we've done. This is just a small example. First of all is inclusion, the whole concept of inclusion, whether it's around disabilities or interfaith or LGBTQ. Each of these areas has been an area of focus. We design a curriculum. We bring congregations in to work together. Our disabilities curriculum helped congregations to not only look at their physical space, but also to look at the attitudes within the congregation. one congregation that went through this program decided that the infant daycare room they were opening in their preschool, they decided to make it available for children with disabilities, which was different staffing and different costs. But they're the only infant program in their whole community that is open to children with disabilities. And they thought that absolutely reflected all the value that they have in being inclusive. In LGBTQ, United Synagogue partnered with Keshet. It is an organization that seeks equality in Jewish life for people who identify as gay or have different gender identities. And we also did an interfaith inclusion with a group called Interfaith Family that helped us to work with families within congregations to identify ways in which they could feel more welcome, whether it's a video on their homepage from interfaith families talking about their connection to the congregation, or having a ritual policy card that tells, what is it that everyone can do, or touch the Torah on the procession, and which things only Jewish individuals can do, like wear a talit or read from the Torah. They wanted to create opportunities for recognizing welcome without having to label differences. And to that end, one of the big things that United Synagogue did about 4 years ago, was changed our membership guidelines for our congregations. And what we said is, it used to say only Jews could be members of conservative synagogues, and it now says that a conservative synagogue can create their own membership guidelines. And we provided a curriculum so that the rabbi can work with the congregation and the leaders to decide what fits that congregation and to make those decisions on their own. And then I will simply conclude, I'm sorry, this is very brief. I'll simply conclude with the age of COVID, as I think of it. As you learned last week, the RA's Committee on Law and Standards adopted a tshuva that enabled us to not just live stream, but also to Zoom, so that congregants could participate in other aspects of ritual that really take a minyan, if you will. So, so many of our congregations, not all of them, but many of them have embraced it, doing services, unfortunately sharing funerals, even doing Shiva through Zoom. Tikkun Leil Shavuot, here in the Atlanta community, we have 35 congregations in our town, 7 of them are conservative. And our Atlanta Rabbinical Assembly put together a Zoom Tikkun Leil Shavuot. We had 600 screens participate. Many of those had more than one person there. And we have just in person, we never get that kind of participation. And they were able to engage scholars from all across the country, just as we're doing here. And so how do we when we get back to our sanctuaries, part of what we are looking at is how do we capture that level of engagement so that we have that face-to-face, in-person experiences within our sacred spaces, but how do we keep those connections and engagement that we have been able to capture in this very, very difficult time. So, and then finally, our high holidays, as you just said, you've got a conference coming up here within our movement. All of our movement partners, the rabbis, the cantors, the executive directors, the educators, and the youth directors have formed a common task force. We communicate regularly with the congregations about planning, concrete,
nous communiquons de façon
and what it might look like, because the only thing we're sure of is it will look different in each of those 600 congregations. So we appreciate Masorti Olami as an opportunity to find new ways to collaborate and share around the globe to help us all continue to thrive, because there's so much that we can learn from one another. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Margot. Very interesting for us to hear about Masorti Judaism in a place where you're a majority and not a minority, and where there's lots of large congregations. But that's the uniqueness in each place. The next speaker we have is Rabbi Marcelo from Mexico, and he's going to tell us about the Masorti movement in Latin America. I actually don't see Marcelo. Are you there somewhere, Marcelo?
I'm here. I'm here.
Very good.
Thank you, Chaim. Shalom.
Shalom.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much.
Agradezco mucho la invitación a nombre
I'm
de
very
los
grateful for this invitation, and I hope that these 60 minutes will share, we will explain the concept of what we are trying to do.
J'espère pouvoir expliquer en 60 minutes maintenant ce que...
¿Continúo o do I continue or
Yes, yes, please. Sí, por favor, Marcelo.
the translation works?
Es simultánea. No, es simultánea, Marcelo.
Okay. En realidad,
Really?
voy a tratar de hablar en 10 minutos lo que ustedes me quieren escuchar. Quería decirles que en AMLAT estamos trabajando tal vez en un ritmo que nunca imaginamos antes, con una intensidad muy especial, lo que nos ha dado a la vez mucha
That
satisfacción
gave us lots of satisfaction
de este trabajo.
as a fruit of
Tenemos
this
sobre
work.
la mesa un board que
We have a
trabajamos
board
en equipo con el rabino Mauricio Walter, con Ariela, y realmente el trabajo ha rendido sus frutos. Recuerdo cuando hace 2 años tuvimos la formación de esta nueva mesa.
Sorry.
Realmente, excuse me.
Chaim, we don't have the translation in French. I don't know if Elias.
Oh, that's a real problem for me. I can speak in English if you want, but in
Le
French.
problème, c'est que si je parle, je coupe la parole au rabbin, en fait, quand je parle.
Ah, Chaim, can you explain? Non, je crois pas, parce que tu dois être dans une salle séparée. Excusez-moi.
D'accord, donc je peux parler, le rabbin ne m'entend pas alors. Je lui
Chaim,
Ça a coupé, de fait, ça a coupé tout à l'heure.
Ah d'accord.
Moi, j'écoutais en espagnol et ça a coupé quand tu as commencé à traduire.
so Chaim, Elias translate, but when he translates, we can't hear the rabbi. So could you explain to Elias how to manage this issue? Non, ouais, il faut écouter en anglais, Elias.
Ah oui.
Mais l'anglais.
Chaim, can you hear me?
Explain to me again what's happening.
So what's happening is that when the rabbi is talking and I'm trying to translate, his voice is cut and we're only hearing me. So it's as if I wasn't an interpreter, like a translator.
You should have on your selections, on the interpretation selections, you should select Spanish to French.
That's what I did. I mean, there is no Spanish to French. There's only English, French, and Spanish.
That's the point.
No, you're also a translator. You should have. Do you have English, French, Spanish? What else do you see there?
Nothing else. Like deactivates English, French, and Spanish. That's all I have.
Right. Okay. We're not going to deal with it now.
Okay.
We don't have a Spanish to French translation. So Marcelo, why don't you move to English, and then we'll have an English to French and English to Spanish translation, and that way everyone will understand you.
I hope so. I also hope you will not laugh at my English, and then I will not laugh at your French or your...
Donc, l'intervenant va...
So, okay, now we are on the same line, and I will just tell you the following. We in AMLAT, in Latin America, we are over 83 family communities in what we divide 4 regions, since it's a very large continent, and we have north, south, east, and west, which is Mexico and Central America, which is Argentina in the south. In the east, we have Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and on the other side, we have a lot of countries like Chile, Colombia, we have Peru, we have I will remember other places, but at the large number we work
en totales tenemos más de
represent the continent. We are really working on in a few fronts, and one of them is with the youth, which we have known in all the continent, and they really are those who know. It's something really very make us very proud, and we really enjoy their work and support them, because it's really very important for us. What we are doing now, we usually have once a year, usually in July, August, Shituf, which is our encounter for 3 days. We did it the last year in Montevideo, Uruguay, and this year
se hizo en Montevideo y este año se iba a hacer
to do it in Argentina. But when it starts all this problem with the COVID,
on avait se réunir.
and I don't know if you hear me at the beginning, I say that we work as a team with our professionals in Israel, which are Rabbi Mauricio Walter and Ariela, and we really did something very great. We transform our physical encounter in a 2 days online activity with lectures, with many things, even with a concert of Chazanim of all the continents of the Jewish, of the conservative or Masorti synagogues, and was great. We had a very large response of people, like I would say that close to the triple of what we have usually in a physical encounter. And we have very good comments on this, and we are thinking to maybe to repeat like in 6 months or something like that, again, this kind of encounter, because it was very we feel like it was spiritually really very important for the people. At the same time, we create a commission, a special part of our board that works also under the instructions of Danny Yoffe as a professional. And we are working on what we call the RAC, which is like 3 words, like the idea of these 3 words is like be in touch with every community, with people from the board or the president or whoever, and we check what do they need and what we can do for them. After we did that with the 80 communities, we are working on a program which will deal with the 3 or the 2 or 3 more important expectations that we have. let's say, the problem of the Yamim Noraim services, which represent also a problem regarding the financial situations of the community. There were no ceremonies, there were not any kind of activity, it's closed. Members pay, but it's not the same income for the communities, and there is a big problem. And this was the first point that board directors show us, that they are very anxious and nervous with what this will be. So we took this and we took one or two other points, and we organized a group, and we are a group of professionals and volunteers that we call every community, and we try to deal with them exactly how we can help them. And in 1 week more, we will have ready a program with professionals in every area, but these professionals will be as volunteers for us. So this is really, I mean, really was a very touchy experience, because the surprise for them to hear our voice in a direct call show them a lot more of letters or any other kind of trying to be together. So this is something that I want to show you, because it's a work, it's really a work, but the same way that I did it with my synagogue, that we are 1,100 families, and we call with a group of volunteers every member of the community. This should be done in every place, because it's the way for the people to feel that we are present. And it's something that I wanted to tell you, because we are very proud of this job, because it moves us and give us a lot of excitement to work for the close futures. I want to tell you also that I forgot that in Shituf, the encounter we have, according to Facebook, we had over 5,000 people coming on and out of the program. So it's also a number for us out of this world. So these two things we are working now, especially in focusing the problem with the COVID and the new reality we are having. And we are very glad that the people come with, even from Spain, are now close and working with us, and we are very happy to share these things. We have we have a few other programs that we are planning. I just wanted to take these minutes to give you the main, and if there is any question, please, I'm glad to share it with you. The last thing is that in 2 weeks we will start a leadership training program that we planned also with the University of San Andres in Argentina, which will do the leadership part, and with some rabbis from the Rabbinical Assembly or the Seminario Rabbinico, working with the Jewish part, and this will be led by Danny Joffre and Mauricio and myself, and we're working very hard, and we hope with this to have new leadership in the future, in the close future, to include in our activities. Thank you for your time, and if there is any question, please, I'm ready to answer you.
Thank you very much, Marcelo, and thank you for being so flexible for changing from Spanish into English just like that. I wish I could say that I could do the same thing in the other direction, but it's not to be. Anyway, we want to move on, and the next country we want to look at is Uganda. Now, Uganda has a unique challenge, and that is that the internet isn't strong enough in Uganda for us to actually be able to speak live with Rabbi Gershom. So we have a pre-recorded message about the community in Uganda, and I will answer questions if people have questions about the community, because I've been there 5 times. So I've had lots of visits in Uganda. So I'm going to ask Tila, please put up the please put up the video now.
My name is Rabbi Gershom Sizomu, and I'm the spiritual leader of the Abayudaya Jewish community of Uganda. Abayudaya is a Luganda word which refers to the Jewish people as the people of Judah. Abayudaya. It is a community of native Ugandans who chose Judaism in 1919. It's not a result of the outside Jewish communities, but it is indigenous that came out of self-motivation. So what makes our community unique is the history. The founder of this community, Semei Kakunguru, read the Christian Bible, which the Christians had given him as a tool for converting people to Christianity. So when he read the Bible, he found out that the Torah, or the 5 books of Moses, spoke more to him because it contained a direct word of God to the people of Israel. So Semei Kakunguru fell in love with Torah and taught the same to the people of our community. By the end of 1919, one by one of our people had converted to Judaism, and there were about 8,000 followers who were willing to observe Torah, and also began to observe Shabbat every week and to also observe the laws of Kashrut. The community faced many challenges after the death of Semei Kakunguru in 1928. There was no leader, every leader like him, who could steer the community into the future. But my grandfather, Samson Mugombe, voluntarily took over leadership in 1936 when the community was crumbling and was declining in numbers. So he took over leadership with few resources to reorganize and to unite the community. And the community survived during his leadership. But then in 1971, the community faced another challenge, and it was a challenge of the coming to power of General Idi Amin Dada. Idi Amin came to power and immediately outlawed Judaism. So we were not allowed to observe publicly or to even go to our places of worship. So I grew up during Idi Amin's regime, and it was very difficult because there was too much discrimination, there was too much mistreatment even in schools. As a child, we were forced to go to Christian services, and if we refused, they would sing insults at us, calling us Christ killers. And that made it very difficult. My father used to pray for the defeat of Idi Amin. And it eventually came on the 11th day of April 1979, and it was the first day of Passover when Amin was defeated, and the new government immediately declared freedom of worship. And it was a very good day because it was the right time when Jewish people yearn for redemption, when Jewish people talk about redemption and freedom from slavery. So I decided on that day that I would become a future leader of this community, because what happened was a real miracle that Amin had to live at the time when every Jew expected freedom.
Okay, so thank you to Rabbi Gershom. A very, very unique and very special community, and for me it made my heart warm to watch that. I've spent many Shabbatot there. Very, very special community, but we have to move on. The day is short and our work is great, and the next community we want to hear about is the Masorti community in Sydney, Australia. And that goes back to Tehillah to manage that connection also. We're going to hear from Rabbi Kaiserblut.
Good evening, my friends. Very, very far deep into the evening here in Sydney, about 4 a.m. It's wonderful to, I wish be able to be with you live, but still really touched to be able to have been invited to be a part of this gathering of Masorti Jews all around the world over, but also specifically the deep connections that I have with the wonderful community there in London in the UK. Spent many, many years there serving, still very, very close and has a deep, important part of my life that I was there. I wanted to speak to you about the worldwide Masorti movement that we have so many wonderful people representing us tonight. I've been blessed to have served in many of these regions in South America, where my father's from, and I spent a year working there, in Israel, in the UK, obviously in the United States. And now I find myself here in Australia, in Sydney, where I've been for the last not quite 4 years. The Jewish presence here really dates back to the first fleets in 1788 when they arrived. The first set of I'd like to say immigrants, but really convicts, many of them. And we know for relatively certainly that at least eight of those people who came were Jews. The first synagogue being set up in Hobart, in Tasmania, to the south. Later on, the main immigration centers, I suppose, or concentrations being in Melbourne and Sydney. Now, to give you a sense of size, many people aren't aware how big Australia actually is. It's about the same size as Europe. Yet, it only has about 25 or so million people total. And most of the people, I think it's 80 or 90%, live within 50 kilometers from the coast. The major cities being Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and then a smattering of small towns throughout the rest. The vast majority today of Jews are concentrated in Melbourne, the largest city, and Sydney closely followed. Brisbane, much, much smaller. Perth and Adelaide also very much smaller. In Sydney, we have in the neighborhood of about 35,000 Jews, and the community where I serve, Emanuel Synagogue, is a unique model where we have both a Reform and a Masorti minyan, and once a month there's also a renewal minyan. So we have 3 full-time rabbis, a cantor, and also a clergy member who's not ordained, but who fulfills many of the life cycle events that we have. We have 3,600 members at the moment, and I serve, yes, I'm a Masorti rabbi, but I serve the community. Now, the Masorti community itself, to give you a little of an idea, was founded in 1998 or thereabouts, where there was a desire for people to have a little bit more of a traditional style davening. Began on Friday nights. The senior rabbi then and now, Rabbi Jeffrey Kamens, he was ordained as a Reform rabbi, but then he went to Israel to study, and now he was I don't know, reordained is the term, I suppose, accepted into membership of the Rabbinical Assembly. And that minyan was begun and has grown. Now we form probably in the neighborhood of about a third or so of the community here, and we're growing. The community has continued to grow. We fill an important niche here in the market, much the same as it is in the UK. I find the Jewish community here, perhaps on a slightly smaller scale. In all of Australia, there is about 100,000 Jews, depending on who you ask. Estimates go as low as 96,000 and high as 110,000. But the makeup and the philosophy and the history is very European based. The highest per capita concentration of Holocaust survivors are here and in Melbourne. We have a huge influx of Jews from South Africa, from Hungary, also survivors coming from Poland, and obviously before that the immigration from the UK, the United Kingdom. Not a huge Jewish community, but quite a conservative, small c Jewish community, really focused on, especially because of the high concentration of Holocaust survivors, huge emphasis placed on Holocaust education. That is changing because, as everywhere in the world, the Holocaust survivors are slowly beginning to leave this world, and so to continue that education, there is a giant question of how that will continue. But the synagogue itself, we have a functioning on Shabbat. Well, we did, and we will go back to that. 2 different services on Friday night and 2 different services on Shabbat morning, a Masorti minyan and a Reformed service on Friday night, and on Shabbat morning, the same. We have, as most synagogues this size, we have regular B'nai Mitzvah many weeks, several during the weeks, usually at least one every week. Interestingly, the Jewish community here in Australia, in Sydney, we are based primarily in the eastern suburbs. This is the only Masorti community here in Sydney. In Melbourne, there is my colleague Yonatan Sadov. He served in the United States. He served in Israel, and now he's serving here. The Kilat Nitzan, Ehud Badel was the rabbi there. Adam Stein, he's now in Vancouver, and now Yonatan Sadov. They've been functioning for not quite 20 years. We collaborate quite closely. There's a couple of chavarot and minions around Australia that are thinking about beginning to coalesce, but the numbers it's hard to understand the way things are just simply spread out here. And I find also culturally, we have a much greater affinity with the Commonwealth, the UK, for example, versus the United States. Just think in terms of politics, questions of culture, we've had much more in common than the United States with the United Kingdom versus the United States. So looking forward to the future, the growth area that we are seeing now is really with a lot of young families, and then eventually them bringing their parents as well. Much the same that happened, I saw with the time that I served in the United Kingdom. We were gaining a lot of membership because of the product that we offer, that people see that traditional modern approach to Judaism that keeps them grounded. The Orthodox here are heavily dominated, I would say, by the Beth Din, which in itself is dominated by the Chabad, by Lubavitch. And that begins to has a discerning effect of, in certain ways, beginning to be a little bit out of touch with the needs of what people are looking for. And so the Masorti Minyan has grown, even in mine, not even 4 years here, quite significantly. So we look forward to continued growth. I know we are quite far out of the beaten path, as it were, but we do welcome guests from time to time. We look forward to people being able to come and be guest speakers here. I'm happy to come and return and speak as well. But this format of being able to share one another with online conversations, I've already had one 2 weeks ago with a colleague and a former roommate of mine from seminary in Ottawa. I've done one. I have one scheduled in the United States in a couple weeks, and so it allows us to build on these connections that we have. So I hope to give you a little bit of a taste of what the Masorti movement is like here. It's quite fledgling, it's quite young, quite vibrant, growing, but the numbers are nowhere near what it is in places, forget about the United States, even in South America, where it's also relatively new. But here, the resources that we have, we're quite poor in human capital. We just don't have a lot of people. But we try and compensate for that with the dynamism and the newness of what we bring. I wish I could be there in person with all of you, and I hope and pray that the travel will soon be back and we can begin to see one another face to face as well.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Rafi. Rafi was here in London for several years, a rabbi in St. Albans, Masorti, just north of London. And it's good to see his face and hear his voice again. So we're moving to the last part of our evening. And I've asked Jill Kaplan, our former president of Masorti Europe, a former president of Masorti Olami, and one of the founders of Masorti Europe, to tell us a little bit about the Masorti movement in Europe. We all know our own country, but we don't all know what's happening in Europe as a whole. So Jill, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chaim. It's been really interesting to hear what's happening around the rest.
Muy interesante escuchar lo que está pasando alrededor de
I had some ideas. You always learn something new every time you hear someone speak. My role is to bring us here, back to where we are, and to give an overview of Masorti Europe. As Chaim said, I've been involved with Masorti Europe since its creation, and putting this presentation together has really underlined how far it's come. And I'd like to do this by giving 4 examples, which I've simply nominated history, past, present, future. The first meeting of Masorti Europe, which was the first official meeting, was held in Paris at the apartment of Claude Macheline, who was a leader in the Adat Shalom community, and that was in February of 2006. The meeting was comprised of rabbis and lay leaders from 6 countries, and the aim was to explore what it might be possible to create across Europe. What's important to understand is that each of the countries and communities represented at that meeting had its own individual history. There's never been any cross-European shared history of Masorti Judaism. Each group that came together had made a specific choice to create a Masorti community, despite there being no history of Masorti Judaism in that country. Jumping forward to 2010, and a Limud Star conference in London with over 100 people from 10 different and many new Masorti communities across Europe. The title of the conference was "We Will Be Dreamers," and that really epitomized where we were. We were aware that the growth across Europe, both in the number of communities and individuals, had been exponential. There was also now a greater understanding of what these and potential communities were looking for, both from their own leaders and from the Masorti Europe movement. The creation of Masorti Europe had made it possible to unite and strengthen the development of all communities, and this was a strategic step in the growth of the movement. The conference underlined the fact that there was a deep desire for more knowledge and for education. It recognized that our communities were stronger together and that within our own communities, there were major and numerous internal strengths and resources that were available to us. And it was our responsibility to learn how to use these together. Making a further leap now to the present and our future, bringing us closer to where we are now. I want to mention 2 meetings, each of which had a specific goal, the aim of which was to continue to strengthen the movement. The first meeting I want to talk about was a meeting of the board and a gathering of leaders from communities, which was held at Dorvador in Paris in November 2018. The meeting was held at the same time as the meetings of Noam and Marom, their leadership and our leadership coming together. This wasn't the first time it had happened, that the 3 parts of the movement had come together, but it was the most important, and it was the most cohesive and interactive time that we'd ever spent together. What it showed was the real need for us to work more closely, both with our youth and young people committees and their leadership, and start to forge a real joining of minds, so that the future of that, with the knowledge that the future of our communities were in the hands of these young people. And it looks very positive. And to finish, to bring us right up to date, to the meeting in Barcelona in November last year. Who knew that that was going to be the last meeting we were together, where we were going to be together for such a long time, and how things would change. But hopefully, sometime in the future, we will once again meet face to face. The focus of that meeting was the next generation and the development of a new leadership cohort, which is exactly what we're hoping to achieve from these sessions that we're now conducting. Sorry about that. These meetings, the aim of the meetings, that these sessions are the beginning of a series of meetings to create a new leadership across the whole of Europe. The representatives at the meeting in Barcelona from both established and new communities is illustrating the continuing growth and expansion of European Masorti, which now includes the Ukraine and Poland, along with new communities in the UK, Spain, France, and Sweden. We're all aware of the ongoing need and potential for growth in Masorti Judaism, both in Europe and across the world. And I'm sure we'll continue to work together to make sure that we achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill. And I felt a bit nostalgic listening to all the different stages in the development, and it's hard for me to believe how far we've come over those years. But in any case, we've heard 5 different speakers talk about the Masorti movement in 5 different areas, very different communities. I'm open to hear 1 or 2 questions at this point if someone has something specific they want to ask, either for one of our speakers or for several of our speakers, and then we'll bring the evening together. If you have a question, please put it in the chat, and then we'll go to you and enable you to ask. Okay. Give a few minutes for that. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll take the opportunity to talk about the future. So the first thing I already mentioned at the beginning of the meeting is that on the 21st of June, we have a study day. And the study day is really about the preparation of our communities for the high holidays. I know that every community, we're asking the question, what it's going to look like on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when either we won't be in our synagogues or the number of people allowed in the synagogues will be very small. I know at our community in London, it's not unusual to have 3,000 people together at the same time. That won't be this year. And all of us are thinking about what is it going to look like and how do we make sure that the experience for our members is as full, as enriching, and as inspiring as any other year. And this is a really, really big challenge. And I know that we are all going to be judged by the extent to which we rise to the occasion and we meet that challenge. And it will be hard, but it's certainly not going to be impossible. And some of our communities are going to come out of this period weakened, and some of us are going to maintain our strength, and some of us are going to be even stronger because we have showed how many, we've showed how important we are to our communities and how good we are at meeting their needs. So on the 21st in the afternoon, we're looking at different aspects of the questions that are arisen. We'll hear some best practice from communities who do really, really good activities online. We'll hear some of the thinking of our leaders about what shape they think the high holiday should have. And I really invite everyone to participate in that day. In July, we come up to the next section of this course. And the new topic that we're going to be talking about is the Masorti movement in Israel. And we'll have 3 sessions on the Masorti movement in Israel. One will be about Masorti Judaism in Israel, the Masorti movement in Israel, the political situation, our achievements, our challenges. The second one of those meetings will look at the Masorti movement in Israel and how it serves our communities in the diaspora. The programs of Marom, the programs of Noam, the programs that are provided for the children of our communities and for the adults of our communities in Israel so that we can strengthen our communities by going to Israel. And the third session will look at Israel as the spiritual center of the Jewish world. We'll be looking at our relationship with Israel, how we build and nurture that relationship, how we support what's happening in Israel, and how we are strengthened by what happens in Israel. So we're dedicating the month of July to our relationship with Israel. So going to the chat now and seeing what questions have come up. And there's some questions about the 21st of June, but there was only one general question, I think, about this evening, and it's a very good question. Someone asked me, how many Masorti Jewish members how many members are there of the Masorti movement in the world? And I think that that's a very good question. And when I have to answer, I'm not sure anyone knows the exact answer to that. But I think it's upwards of 1 million people. But Margo, I think you have your hand up, so maybe you'll.
I do. Chaim, I said there were close to 600 congregations in North America, and based on all of our studies, there are about 1.35 million Jews within North America who identify as conservative.
Right. So if it's 1.35 in North America, I think we're probably around 1.5 around the world. So that's not such a small number. So 13 million Jews in the world, we're not such a small number. And I think it's really important for us to know that, because I think particularly in Europe, we all feel small, and we all feel that everyone looks down on us because we're such a small movement. And in the Jewish world, we're not a small movement, and we're an important movement. So it only remains to me to thank people for taking the time this evening to be with us. I want to thank our speakers who took their time and prepared and presented and gave us a very interesting evening. And I want to thank Tehillah, who managed all of the technology. And I want to thank our translators who worked very hard this evening to make sure that we could understand in all of our languages. And we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible on the 21st when we'll have solved the Spanish to French conundrum. And we're hoping to add a fourth language and to also have German as one of our languages on the 21st. So thank you to everyone, and look forward to seeing you again. Take care of yourselves, be well, and Laila Tov.
Shalom.
Laila Tov.
Thank you very much.
Laila Tov. Thank you very much. Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. Laila Tov, Rabbi Ron, Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
It's so nice, Joanna. It's so nice to see so many faces of friends. It's all around.
Shall we have the replay soon?
Laila Tov.
Will there be